Welcome to the Real Estate Investing School podcast. I'm your host, Joe Jensen. Our guest today is Mihir. He is an electronics engineer from India that moved to the US when he was 22. He worked in corporate America for a decade before switching to real estate full time and started pursuing his dreams of financial freedom. Mihir transacted over 50 plus single family deals before switching to value add apartments, which I'm excited to dive into. He currently owns over 100 plus doors in the apartment space in the Midwest, and he's currently working on 3 flips. He's man, you've been pretty lazy there, Mihir. Just taking it easy, huh?
I should probably call myself like a lazy investor with the way I'm going right now.
I don't know. It sounds like you've done a ton. I'm really excited to learn about how you scaled to those kind of numbers and how you got into it. You've done, I mean, you're kind of a lot of people's benchmark, that would be the ultimate goal, owning 100 plus doors in apartments. It's just kind of like this thing that a lot of really, really experienced investors like, oh, that would be so cool. And you've obviously done it. And so I'm excited to chat with you about that. But yeah, man, how are you doing today? How's life going? How are you feeling?
So first of all, thank you for the intro, Joe. I appreciate it, and thanks to Brody as well for giving me this opportunity. It's been great. Life's been pretty good. I've traveled quite a bit in the last 3-4 months, so I can't really
Nice.
complain. And for today being Monday, I'm like pretty upbeat, and
Yeah.
that almost
Good.
rarely happens. It really happened in the last 4 or 5 years, but I'm glad to be doing what I'm doing right now.
I bet. That's awesome, man. So where have you been traveling to? Anywhere fun?
Yeah, so I visited Europe for the first time in my life. I've never been to
Cool.
Europe before, so I hit up like 10 countries,
Oh,
kind of just like
nice.
backpack my way through it. And I went back home to India to spend some time with my family, my mom and dad,
Awesome.
which was also like one of the big driving factors for me to, take a break from my job and spend more family time back home.
That's cool. So how long has it been since you exited like having a full-time job and everything and started doing real estate?
It has been exactly a year actually. So I quit my job on May 6th last year on my birthday. So it's been a little over a year.
Wow, yeah, just
Yeah.
barely. So did you do real estate during the job as well, or is everything I just listed all happened in the past year?
It's the latter. No, I actually started in 2018. I
Okay,
wish
awesome.
I wish I did all that in one year. I know people
Yeah.
who did that.
I don't
Kudos to
know.
them.
That sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a lot of hustle, but I spread over a span of 4 or 5 years now.
Cool.
I started with like a single family back in 2018, and it just kept growing after that.
So let's dive into that. I'm always interested to hear about like how people first got turned on to real estate as an investment tool and why they did it. So you came over from India, which is a whole nother story. We could do a whole podcast on that. I'm so interested in that. But you worked in corporate America for about 10 years, and it sounds like about halfway through you started getting an itch. So anyway, kind of explain how that process worked out for you.
Absolutely, yeah. So I've always been interested in checking out houses, and and investments in general. Like I've always had like stock investments, stock trading all the time. But real estate in America was a new game to me. Like my mom back home, she invested in properties. And in India, the name of the game is appreciation. Like, you invest in a property, you sit on it for 10 years, it kind of doubles, triples,
Sure.
especially if you're in like a growing city like the city I'm from. So I've seen my mom do it, and she was always savvy when it came to like taxes. She did the 1031s, she did the depreciation, you name it, she did it. My dad, not so much, but I always heard my mom talk about it. So it was always there. The bug was always there. My mom planted it. But after I came to America, it was a completely new ball game to me. I didn't quite know how it worked. And as an immigrant, when I started to even like purchase my primary residence or even
Mm.
like my first investment property, banks wouldn't lend a loan on it because they're like, hey, you got to be a U.S. citizen. You
Yeah.
need to meet certain requirements. They're like, what if you just leave the country and go? Like, we can't come after your house, stuff like that.
Sure.
So there are a lot of constraints, and then it kind of like discouraged me initially. So I just like stopped searching for real estate early on. But then I started developing a relationship with a local bank completely by accident, not in terms of investment, but that's where I started depositing my checks. Like, once I got my primary house, they did a HELOC for me. So I built that relationship, and I just like randomly mentioned that, hey, it's so difficult to buy an investment property. Um, what do I do about it? Because I'm not a U.S. citizen. And they're like, hey, you have an account with us. You have a good long-standing relationship with us. We can help you, cross that bridge. So that problem, once the problem was taken care of, everything else was it kind of just like fell in place. But I think going back to your question of like what made me invest in real estate in America, especially, was like you said, like halfway through my corporate career, there was this like one moment where I bought my house in September 2015, and a month into it, we got this email saying, "Hey, we're laying off, like a few grand, like thousands of engineers at a company."
Oh, geez.
And it just gave me like nightmares because I've never been through something like that before. And right after I bought a house, I paid quite a hefty down payment, so it was stressful.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I was again like brainstorming with my friends, and I'm like, "Yo, like if I get fired, this is like the worst case scenario. It's not looking good." And they're like, it's like a random thing that came up, and one of my buddies was like, I wish there was a way for us to take control of our own finances, and we wouldn't let like somebody else control it.
Yeah.
And it hit me really hard when he said that, and I'm like, okay, so what do I do about it? Like, where do I start? And then I spoke to my mom, and she's like, hey, you should really push this real estate like investment part of it. If one bank says no, just keep talking to others. There's always
Yeah.
somebody who'll say yes. Um, so that's when it like really, it catapulted my investment career because that stressful situation kind of like twisted my arm. Like I need to like do something about it. I can't just like rely on somebody else to feed me.
Man, that's cool. Like there's so many nuggets in what you just talked about that we could dive into. But one, I loved how she mentioned like if one says no, like another will say yes. Like so
Yeah,
many times we just get stopped before we start because we assume, oh, it won't work because one or two people said no. You go to a bank, can I get a loan? They're like, no, you're an immigrant. And you're like, or you
yeah,
have low credit, or everybody has their own reasons, right? And for you, that was your situation. They're like, no, you're not a U.S. citizen fully, and so you can't. And it's like, oh, okay.
yeah. I
I
mean
mean,
that
and
that
they're the bank, they're a lender, they're reputable. This isn't like some guy on the street. Like you're getting the answer from the
right.
source. It
Yeah,
won't work.
yeah,
It's easy to just fold at that point. And I
yeah,
love that you've eventually like, oh wait, there's other ways.
yeah.
So what was the other ways though? Did you get your U.S. citizenship and start doing it traditionally, or were they just giving you like investment loans based off of like LLCs, or how did that work? What did you arrange with your local lender?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I started an LLC, and they would lend directly to my LLC.
So
I,
real
I,
quick, I don't mean to interrupt you. Do you not need to be a U.S. citizen to start an LLC?
no, so I didn't structure it as a C corp or an S corp. It's just like a pass through entity.
And that's
So
okay.
yeah, so I ran it by my lawyer, and I was like, hey, I know I'm not really running payroll or anything. This is just for my
Sure.
asset protection. Like I don't want somebody coming after me. So
Yeah.
if something happens to property or some liability, let them go after the LLC and not me. So the lawyer was like, yeah, that's cool. So I bought a
There you
property. The first one I bought was under my LLC, and I went to the bank and I'm like, hey, I know I'm an immigrant, but the property is in my LLC. It's in a company name. This is only for like liability purpose. Can you give me a commercial loan? So
Yeah.
now that just completely changed the ball game. So if
Love it.
it's a traditional loan, I would have to like personally guarantee it. Like they need to know me, stuff like that. But if it's a commercial loan, the bank holds the note in house.
Sure.
I believe like they don't really have to sell it. So they held the note in house, and the rate was higher than a traditional like Fannie Mae Freddie Mac loan,
Yep.
but it got the job done. So
Well, and the funny thing with that is it's like, and that's what real estate investing is anyway. Everything else, using all the conventional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that's all just like our hacks. And you can get a pretty good portfolio doing
yeah,
that,
yeah,
doing the house hacks and you taking advantage of it. But you're only going to hit 5 or 10 and then you're done, right?
right.
So anybody who's doing anything 5 units or more, anybody who's doing, anything at scale, it's all going to be commercial loans anyway. So you were just thrown into that as the stars. Like, this is all you can do. You're like, all right, that's what I'll rock with. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't know any better actually. So this is how I got started with commercial loans. So I never messed with the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac individual loans. So when some of the investors that I know were hitting a roadblock with limited loans, I never quite faced that problem.
Yeah,
So
you're like,
I
well, this is just life. Like everybody else is all spoiled with these conventional loans, and you're just
yeah,
like, I don't know, guys. I'm just still doing what I've always done.
exactly. Yeah. So I guess a rejection is good sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I love that, man. So you tell us about your first deal then. So you figured out you want to buy real estate. Obviously, you've had some exposure to it. I'm sure you started studying a ton. You seem like an intellect if you're working in engineering and whatnot. So you start studying this out. You learn you want to do it, and then how do you find and pick and know that you should even buy this first deal?
Oh man, so the first I would say 6 to 9 months were stressful and nightmarish because there was so much
Yeah.
information and I used to get overwhelmed. Like
Uh huh.
I've read some seriously difficult engineering textbooks, which I found way easier than trying to figure out how to do this real estate thing. Like
Yeah.
it sounds silly right now looking back, but at that moment it was just intense. So I
It's not crazy to me though, because it's like it's not a straight science. It's like
right,
an art. There's
it is.
opinions and there's perspectives and it's changing and it's like, it's very liquid. I feel like it's a liquid playing field. And so that's not even surprising actually to hear you say that compared to like the
Yeah,
straight hard science, like these are the facts, they're not going
yeah,
to change. It's
exactly.
like, yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it felt like completely different language to me, like you said,
Hmm.
in engineering you say, hey, the sun rises in the east, the sun does rise in the east. But you go to real estate, you talk to different people and they're like, no, no, don't buy self-storage, only buy apartments.
Yeah.
Oh no, like invest in trailer parks, stuff like that. And I'm like, come on, like what's going on?
Yeah, you're crazy
So
to do single family. Like,
yeah,
never touch things. Oh, don't
yeah,
buy in the Midwest. Like, I won't appreciate.
yeah,
Oh, don't buy on the coast. Like, it's too like everybody has an opinion. There,
I know.
yeah,
Everybody with a head on had an opinion, and I'm like, this is getting way out of bounds. So I binged on a bunch of YouTube videos. I visited Bigger Pockets religiously on a daily basis,
sure.
and that was a time when I read a lot of books too. Like anybody would state some random book, I would just read it because I just wanted to just gobble up as much information as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me like 6 to 9 months to actually feel comfortable,
Yeah,
to actually pull the trigger on it. But I don't know if it's like an engineer thing or just like the way I'm wired, but I had the analysis paralysis quite a bit. Uh, I set myself like certain criteria, and if the deal wouldn't hit that criteria, I just wouldn't touch it. And it just kept dragging on. And after a while, I'm like, you know what? I just need to like start taking action. Even if I lose a few grand, I'll just consider that as a lesson learned, like a tuition that I've paid to learn this
sure.
real estate game. But I should just like start taking action. So now, in retrospect, I wish I didn't pass up on all those deals in 2017. I would shoot for like 20% cash on cash, and if I wouldn't get 20%, I would just like straight up pass up on those.
Yeah.
So
Which
yeah.
nowadays, anything bought over 3 years ago, you're like, I would have taken a
Oh
zero
yeah,
percent. Like, I would have taken a
yeah.
loss, But it's good to have the standards. And how's that shifted now? What kind of returns dynamic do you look for now when you're deciding to pull the trigger versus back then?
Oh, so I have like two or three different filters now. So if it's a single family rental, which I've not bought in a while now, so it's been 3 or 4 years since I bought a single family rental.
Okay.
I've been purely focusing on either apartments, doing flips, or Airbnbs. That's
Okay.
basically what I'm
Cool.
doing. But when I was like actively flipping and doing single family rentals, I would have like different metrics that I would try to hit. Like in
Nice.
the Midwest, I think like a 10 to 12% is a decent cash on cash.
Cool. Cool. That's awesome. Did you? I'm always interested in deal calculators. So I have like an asset analyzer I created that most people in school know I'm like pretty proud of. Whatever.
Okay.
It's like I've put a lot of time into it, but I collect them, right? Because a lot there, everybody has their own calculators and ways to analyze a deal. Did you just use someone else's? Did you end up putting your own together? Like, how do you run the numbers and analyze a deal to decide if it hits the metrics that you wanted it to hit?
So I think I got great satisfaction building my own calculator.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to start from scratch.
Uh
So I,
huh.
I would just grab as much information as possible and pack it in a spreadsheet. I would put in like my own numbers, some extra fudge factors in just to be more conservative. So I
Yeah.
built my own spreadsheet and that's what I go by.
Love
But
it.
when it comes to like apartments and flips, I just go with something more standard that's out there.
Cool, cool. That's awesome. I was wondering if that'd be your answer because that's how I like to do it too.
Dude, I
Um,
love I love spreadsheets and I love, coming up with my own calculator. So it's like part of the game. I just love it.
yeah, which is funny because I'm horrible at math, but I love spreadsheets. Like it's like takes away the hard part for me, and then it's just like fun and interesting because it just gives you so much information. I think it's such a vital part of real estate investing is feeling confident and comfortable running the numbers where it comes out you're like okay. now I have a reason to say yes or a reason to say no, and that's
Right.
what those analyzers give you. Um, so yeah, let's talk about the transition though. So how you bought a bunch of single family homes? I mean, like over 50 of them. Like, how did you scale that? How are you funding that? And then what made you transition?
Yeah. So when I first started, I think in the first 4 or 5 months, I bought five doors, two duplexes and one single family. And at that point, I was just out of cash. Like
Sure.
I just put down 20%, 20%, 20%. I'm out of
Hmm.
money. And my initial thought was, okay, I'll just wait for a year. I'll just, snowball whatever rent money I get. And I'll buy the sixth one, seventh one. So I still remember, like, I was actually going through my old goals sheet. And back then, my goal was to buy like at least start with five and then just buy two or three properties every year.
Yeah.
But after networking with a couple of investors locally, they're like, hey, if you just partner up with people or, if you reach out to your friends and family, borrow cash, pay cash for properties, and then refinance it out as soon as you get done with rehab, that's actually a good way to scale. And it was nice in theory, but when I actually tried implementing that, it was again another nightmare that I faced because I'm like, I've never really asked people for money. And I'm like,
Sure.
this is like not up my alley. But later on, I practiced some more, and then I think the big mind shift came when I talked to people and said, "Hey, I'm not really like asking for money. It's more of an opportunity for people to invest." Because
Hmm.
if there were situations where I had the money and I would just like run the deal by my friends, and they're like, "Hey, so how do we get involved?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, so here's something you could do. You could invest with me. I can give you a return, and I can use my own funds to invest in something else, so that way I can buy two or three properties at the same time." And these are the guys that were busy with their family, kids. They were like located on Cali, so they weren't actually present in Indy. So their role was very limited to the deal. So they
Yeah.
could either bring cash, or you could either bring a deal, or you could oversee rehab, put the contractors together. So there's only a few things that you could do. And for somebody who's remote, who's not experienced in real estate, and didn't have a lot of knowledge about it, they felt more comfortable in getting the passive income part of it than playing an active role. And
Sure.
with their family commitments and stuff, they actually preferred being passive. So that way, when I would like run these deals by them, it felt like a natural transition for them to like to invest in my deals, and they know me as a person because they wouldn't really care about what house I'm buying, what street, what color it is, because they trust me as a person. So that's why they've like invested with me. And the moment I started doing that, I think that definitely changed my path. And the other thing is, I've met two really wonderful investors off of Bigger Pockets. I've always kept in touch with them. And I ended up teaming up with them, and we started growing our portfolio together, like 50-50 JV relationship.
Mm.
So that was also really good. And for me, like the biggest change came when the investors that I know also ended up being my friends, because now you're chatting on daily basis, just like bouncing ideas with each other, and it just
Yeah.
kept me motivated to go. So that helped with the scaling as well as keeping me on track with the scaling.
So how did you partner with the experienced guys? Because I agree, I think it's such a win-win to have the people who don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge to do a deal, and then you can say, "Hey, give me the money, I'll do the deal." Like,
Right.
and like I say, you're honestly doing them a favor because it's like if you have the money, it's like you'd rather just do the deal on your own and not
Yeah.
split anything. Like you're
Yeah.
doing all the
Yeah.
work, you have all the knowledge, you went through all the headache. Like I remember doing some deals, and like I hate partnering on deals, and I do it quite a bit, but I'm like, I'd really rather keep this as mine.
Yeah.
But like, so
Absolutely.
it's a huge win-win. But when you're starting to partner with these more experienced guys, you said, oh, you start doing these big 50-50 portfolio growth. How did you guys arrange that where everybody's providing enough value when you both have the knowledge and the resources, how different was that?
So actually, it didn't feel stressful. I've actually been open to partnering with people, and one of my biggest like litmus tests for me, like the main test that I put myself through, is how is that relationship with them going? Like, is it
Hmm.
stressful? Are they fairly on the same page as you? So that's something that I always like assess. And if it's like fairly easygoing, and we're on the same page, and we have the same ideas on what needs to be done, what kind of deals we want to buy, what kind of returns we want, and what kind of exit path we want. If all these align, then I'm fairly comfortable pulling the trigger on the partnership. Um, and with these guys, like I've been talking to them for a while at that point, so it didn't really feel like I'm partnering up with a stranger, because at that point we built that personal rapport. I've met them in person. I've had them over for lunch and dinners and drinks. So
Yeah.
the So the friendship was there, but it was built on a business with same ideals and goals. So it kind of felt like a natural alignment. And I think they also realize that if I'm the boots on the ground, if I can give them access to deals, I have access to contractors, and I can be like the eyes and ears on the ground. That's a good value add for them because they were like out of state, so they already had properties in the area, but having that person who they can team up
Hmm.
with in Indy, like that's also a value add for them, and it also helped me out because I like being held accountable. So it's always nice to have somebody to like talk to and keep those deals going.
Yeah, and you get to celebrate your wins together, and
Absolutely,
it's
yeah.
it's fun. So, how, if you don't mind, you don't have to, but would you mind sharing kind of how you structured the partnership on some of these deals? I mean, are you providing the money, or they providing the money, or you're just providing like the feet on the ground? Like, how did you structure some of these partnerships with more experienced investors?
So I can think of like two or three different deals where like the structure was just completely fluid. Uh, Initially the goal was to do like 50-50 everything. Like you can somebody who's not since I'm the boots on ground, I take care of like all the in-person activities that can be done in person,
Hmm.
like checking out the contracts, like taking weekly photos and stuff like that, quality checks, or doing the inspection walkthroughs. Anything that can be done in person, I do it. Like utilities and stuff, like any online work, like property taxes, anything that can be done online, insurances and stuff like that, they took care of it.
Cool.
And for as far as like cash, sometimes like we would just put in 50-50, or my buddy would put in the purchase price, I would take care of the rehab, or he would take care of the entire thing one time, or I would take care of the entire thing the other time. So it just depended on whether we had cash at that moment or not, or how we would make the deal work. There were instances where both of us were out of cash and we had the deal on hand, so we had to reach out to like our network to see if
Gotcha.
a third person would lend money at a certain interest rate, and then we would just like take down the deal together.
That's cool. And these are all deals like you're doing a lot of value add like burst stuff where you're pulling the money back out. So
Right,
even though,
right.
he might be putting in money or you're putting in the rehab, you're really the goal, and have you found that to be the reality of where you're able to pull out the majority of that money, or how does that play out?
Yeah, so we were able to pull out a good chunk of the money. I remember like at one point we ran the metrics because we built a portfolio, at least like our combined portfolio as well as like mine was little over like 40-ish doors,
Hmm.
and we only had about like 20K in like out of pocket.
Wow. For 40 doors.
Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy. And these are the single family ones when you were still doing that?
So it was singles up to 4 units.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. So like the residential stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
That's really cool. And that's how you're able to kind of scale that of just partnering up. It seems like the benefit for you is just having somebody else there to make it more real and exciting and structured. Like, 'cause it seems like, cause why couldn't you have just done it on your own? Like,
yeah.
why bring them in? You know?
Yeah, so I actually thought about this because like every investor goes through this like, hey, do I bring other people in? Can I just like keep it to myself? I think for me, like the biggest factor for me was if I have like a buddy that I can like trust and partner with, it just keeps me more motivated to do at a, I guess, quicker pace. If it
Sure.
was up to me, I would probably like do a little bit and then I'd just like chill and go on a vacation. Like that's just
Yeah.
my default mode. But if I had somebody who can keep me accountable, I think I can. That just brings out the best in me.
That's cool.
And
And,
if
and if you think about it, it's like, okay, if I could do 5 deals on my own, some people think, well, then if I do 10 deals with a partner, but I own 50% of them, that's kind of the same thing. But it's like, but what if it's 5 deals on your own or 15 or 20 deals with a
right,
partner? You know what I
yeah,
mean? Then it's like, oh, that's exponential growth. Like you actually own more, even owning half, than you
yeah.
would owning 100% of less because of the momentum and the opportunities and everything it gives you and the accountability and structure. And obviously they can bring a lot of value and take up
Oh,
use
absolutely.
a lot of their bandwidth that you don't have.
If it was just up to me, I think I would have just stuck with the one method that I knew. Like there's only like one. It's like a single vision thing, right? I would just like focus on one strategy and I would just like stick to it.
Yeah.
But by partnering with my friend, like he opened the doors to, like a lot of other avenues. Like he would help me see other things that I would normally not see. So I would invest in like other areas where I thought it was like completely overpriced, but he had the vision that hey, if you like hold it long enough, we'll actually come out ahead. So instead of just like looking at the value right now, like maybe look 2 or 3 years ahead and see if
Mm.
that's in the path of progress, and then start investing there. And that kind of like worked out for us. So just
Well, that's
getting that
cool.
fresh perspective is also like really important.
Yeah, because like we talked about, like it's almost like an art, not just a science, right? And so
Exactly.
every
Yeah.
artist can, sees it in their
Yeah.
own way. And then when you combine that with, let's say, you spend 6 to 8 months learning your first niche, and then it's like there's 1,000 different niches. And so if
Yeah.
you can take someone that already spent that learning apartments and then
Yeah.
just kind of like merge worlds. So how did you pivot to doing apartments? Because you did a ton of single families. You're obviously good at it. You did the whole birthing to scale that, and then you're like, I haven't done that in years now. And
Yeah.
so it's like, what brought the pivot to apartments, and how did you actually like make that jump? Because it's kind of a different world.
It really was. It was overwhelming at first because I'm used to running numbers on maybe four doors, and I know that stuff like the back of my mind. But running numbers on 30, 40 units, it seemed daunting at first. So I had to like get myself familiar with the calculator, and I tried building myself like my own one, but I just it was just too much. So I
Yeah,
went with something that's more standard. And I think the comfort started setting in once I was familiar with the numbers and how it all worked. So I obviously read a couple of books on apartment investing, and it gave me like the fundamental ideas. And I talked to a couple of apartment owners as well, just to get the tummy comfort to take the plunge.
yeah,
But I think the biggest factor for me to pull the trigger was if I were to like replace 50 roofs on my single families, that would cost me a fortune. But
sure.
ideally, if you have 50 unit apartment building, if everything was consolidated in one building, and if I were to just like replace a roof on one building, that's way cheaper than replacing like 50 individual roofs. So,
I like
but
that.
yeah, when you start thinking about the economies of scale, it kind of start makes sense.
Yeah, well, because you look at your big capex items, and it's like, that's a really good point. I've never quite thought of it exactly like that, but I like that. You're like, it's gonna be cheaper to do
Yeah,
this than
yeah,
50 individual roofs.
yeah, yeah.
Um, that's cool. I love that, man. So then, did you when you first did apartments, was that with a partner, or did you just do it on your own, or what was your first like apartment purchase? Maybe we could talk about that.
Yeah, it was my. I did it with a partner. Again, same relationship that I've had with an investor. So he was always focused on apartments. He wanted to grow, and this was a time I believe like around 2020, 2021, where the interest rates were like really low.
Mm,
It would have been a sin to like not buy an apartment if the
for
numbers
real.
worked out because it was like free money basically,
Yeah.
like 3 or 4% interest rate, like really low. Just lock that. And I ran the numbers on the cash flow part of it and the value add component. Uh, the way you run the numbers on apartment is slightly different from single family because it's completely based on the net operating income. Like how do you increase the income, decrease expenses, and then you get an evaluation of the property. So when we ran the numbers on it, it made sense, like, at least on paper. So I walked a couple of buildings. I was scoping out the area in Indy. A lot of them made sense, but also a lot of them seemed like a really heavy lift. A lot of them needed like 30, 40 units turn, which I didn't have the crews for. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, and I just didn't have the confidence. So I finally pulled the trigger on a deal where I drove by a building. um, it looked really good, like the red brick standard, like nothing too crazy, regular Midwest building. It seemed like an ideal size. It looked like it had like 30, 40 units. So I looked it up. I looked up the owner, and we reached out to the owner, and the owner said, "Hey, we're listing it with the broker like next week." And coincidentally, like we knew the broker, so we reached out to the broker and like, "Hey, can you like hook us up with the T12, like the rent rolls and all the information, so we can run the numbers on it and see if it makes sense." So he provided all the documents, we ran the numbers, and this seemed like a really good value add deal. And once you throw in the interest rate that the banks were offering back in 2020, 2021, it was like a cash cow. So I'm like, if I can buy like one of this every year or even 2 years,
Mm.
I'll be good. Like I don't have to mess with 10 single families. I could just like focus on one of these, which gives me the same amount of cash flow.
Well,
So
again, when you look at the economies of scale, it's like, hey, running the numbers on an apartment complex is a lot more in depth, takes a lot more time than a single family. But does it take more time than running 100 single families?
yeah,
You know what I mean? It's like, well, at that point,
yeah,
it's less,
yeah,
especially
yeah,
once you know what you're doing with it. That's cool. So,
yeah.
so you guys, how big was the first unit you tied down, and how did you fund it?
So it's a 36 unit, and we came up with our own capital. The
Nice,
way I came up with my capital was actually I sold a couple of rentals. I
cool.
did a 1031, and I just rolled the funds into the apartment building for down payment.
That's awesome. And that wasn't an issue going from the little single family to a 36 unit. The 1031 was that still like kind enough? They didn't care.
Yeah, so the 1031 needs to be either the same value or more.
Right.
So yeah, I ran it by a 1031 company. They had no issues with it. So whatever
Awesome.
proceeds that I got, it just went straight into the apartment building.
That's cool. Cool. Because I haven't done that. I know that they just say that it needs to be like, it needs to be greater value and it needs to be like a like kind investment. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I didn't know how, if that was close enough to the right kind. So that's cool that that would work. And so you 1031 those into paying the capital to tie down to get this big well, small apartment complex,
right. Yeah.
and then you had one under your belt. How was that? Was that like a game changer mentally? That's like, holy
It
smokes, this
it
works.
really was. It really was. Like that feeling was incredible. I still remember the closing, like on the closing day. I was like ecstatic. I'm like,
Yeah,
why didn't I do this before? And like
yeah,
it's like one of those questions where like, should I have just like started this route like right from the get-go? Because if I did this in 2017, I would have been in a much better position. But then again, I'm like, I wouldn't have had this confidence that I have at that moment if I didn't do the single families. So
yeah.
the stuff that I know, like the first couple of single family rehabs, like I did all of it myself. Like I used
Mm,
to watch like YouTube tutorials, like do the flooring, do the plumbing.
really,
So
you're
this
in
this
there swinging hammers, huh?
yeah, I had no clue what I was doing, but the work turned out to be pretty good. And it passed inspection. I'm like, huh, maybe that's something I could do. And by like rental turn number three, I realized, no, this is not something I want to do. Because I
Yeah,
would do this in the evenings and on the weekends because I still had a job at that point. So I'd be like putting in like 60, 70 hours a week
yeah,
at my job. And then I would also do this as a side hustle, right? So it
yeah.
was like too much.
You're like, this
Um,
is the opposite of freedom. Like, what
yeah.
am I doing here?
I'm like running several rat races at one moment. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was not the right way to go about it.
So when with the apartment, so is the goal when you're buying these apartment complex, are you personally looking for just kind of cash flow to build that lifestyle freedom? Or is it more of like a value add like exit because now you can, make improve the cap rate so much that it's like, oh, now there's $1 million of extra value here, even though we just, bought it, but we fixed the NOI and we lowered this, is there an exit plan on these, or are you just really just buying like cash flow gold just like you would your single families?
No, I always have an exit plan. I look at it as a 5-year investment. I definitely want it to cash flow because I wouldn't invest in the Midwest if there's no cash flow in it. I'd rather like put my money
Sure.
elsewhere, right? So if there's no cash flow, I would not invest in the building. But I always go in with the end goal in mind, just in case the market turns or like 3 or 4 years from now, if the interest rates just go up, then I'd be in a lot of trouble because most of the commercial loans are 5-year balloons. So I
Right.
think, yeah, in the next year or two, you'd see a lot of commercial properties struggling with keeping up with the loans because a lot of them that bought 3 or 4 years ago, their loans are going to mature and now the balloon payment is going to shoot up. So at that point,
Yeah,
it's a
people were
question for them.
getting it, like I said, even
Yeah,
even when you were,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
that 2018, 2019, those were super cheap,
yeah,
but now they're going to be a lot bigger.
yeah,
So you got to have that. You got to be prepared for that.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And
that makes sense.
there are loans that are available that can be assumable to the new buyer. So the
Hmm.
goal would be like refinance all the properties into like an assumable loan. So whoever takes it over down the road, they can assume the same interest rates instead of paying like
Mm.
9%, 8%, like 2, 3 years from now. If you can like lock in a rate at like 4 or 5%, and if it's assumable, then that's beneficial to the buyer too, and you won't have any trouble as a seller in selling the property.
That's cool. So it sounds like that's more of your backup though. But the original, like, still the heart of it, you want just cash flow, like
Absolutely, yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's kind of the gameplay. A
right,
plan is you
right,
just want to live off that cash flow and
yeah,
have that
yeah,
money, and then the B
yeah,
plan is I have exit strategies,
yeah.
but they're not the primary like goal.
No,
Is to
no,
exit in 5 years.
no. I wouldn't like buy an apartment building just to flip it.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Because
I know
that's what all
people.
these syndications do, right?
Yeah,
All the funds and syndications, like they're just flippers.
right,
Instead of doing a single family house in 3 months, they're doing a 100 unit complex in 5 years
right,
or 3 to 5. But they're really just flipping it. That's the whole goal, right?
yeah,
But yours is actually more of a long term play if it continues to make
yeah,
sense.
absolutely.
That's cool. That's cool. What kind of cash and cash return are you looking for on these apartment complexes as opposed to the single family? Is it more? Is it less? Or is it still kind of the same standard?
So I would say the biggest benefit. in terms of like owning an apartment is actually the depreciation of it or
Mm,
the accelerated depreciation of it. So if I have like a big chunk of capital gains that I need to offset, so the accelerated depreciation that apartments offer, that kind of like helps with that. So the amount of money you can write off owning an apartment is way more than a single family. So I feel like there's a lot of value at the back end of it when you file for taxes.
sure.
So in terms of like cash flow, like it doesn't beat like an Airbnb. Like if I bought a single family and did an Airbnb, I'd probably cash flow like crazy. And I'm not doing like Airbnbs on an apartment building right now. It's just like traditional long-term rental, like B minus C plus kind of neighborhood. So it's like very like bread and butter like apartment building investing. So I would say the cash on cash is probably lower when compared to a single family. But when I file for taxes in
Yeah, yeah,
April,
yeah.
like that's when I see the biggest benefit of owning an apartment.
Yeah, so you'd be fine with like a 5% cash and cash return on an apartment complex, but as opposed to your 10 or 12 you'd be looking for on your single families when you're considering all the other benefits.
Yeah, I'd probably say like 5 to 7%.
Cool.
Uh, and on the back end of it, because I mean, I would like to like take a comprehensive look at it, because when you go to file taxes, that's when you truly realize like what you've saved in terms of like taxes and stuff. So
Yeah, and I think that's vital. When I have my analyzer, I show people, I go through, and it's kind of built around the cash and cash return. But then there's this other sheet. When you scan to the right, it's like, but here's the whole big picture. And like I
yeah,
say, you've got your appreciation, you've got your tax savings. You know what I
yeah,
mean? You've got the equity increase from the principal pay down. It's like there's so many other
yeah,
buckets that are giving you a higher cash. If you ran those numbers as if they were a
yeah,
cash and cash return, they're a higher ROI than the actual
yeah.
cash flow.
Oh,
You know what I
absolutely.
mean?
I believe a lot of people compare the IRR instead of just the cash on cash when it comes to like the apartment buildings. For
Sure.
singles, it's okay to just like do the cash on cash, but when you're dealing with a larger investment like an apartment, it's better to look at the IRR because there's like a lot of layered benefits that people like if you're not factoring those in, I think you feel like, why am I investing in apartments? Because the returns are lower. But
Right.
it's important to have the knowledge about like the depreciation, the accelerated depreciation, um, stuff like that. Yeah.
And so just for the listeners, IRR is the internal rate of return, but will you break that down? Not like the formula, but will you just kind of explain like what the difference is between cash and cash return and doing it on an IRR?
Yeah, so cash on cash is basically what is the amount you're getting back based on the amount you invested, right? Whereas IRR, you're looking at regular intervals of payment coming through like rent checks or different income sources in your apartment, but you're also looking at it from like a very comprehensive like holistic view in a 5 to 6 year period. Cash and cash typically you do it on like a yearly basis,
Hmm.
but uh, IRR is more of, hey, here's X amount of money coming in at regular intervals, so here's a rate of return based on that over a 5 to 6 year period, and this is what you're looking at. So typically for like an apartment building, you'd say if it meets the 15% IRR, it's worth taking a look at. Whereas for singles, you'd say, okay, if it hits the 10% cash on cash, it's worth taking a look at. But like very much like you have a spreadsheet that actually goes into the tax benefits of owning an apartment. And that's where you see the real meat and potatoes of owning the benefits of owning an apartment building.
So does the IRR can consider does it have to have an exit date to get an IRR formula?
Yeah,
Correct.
typically, yeah, yeah. It's based on the number of intervals of payments. So if like a 5 year, you have a different IRR versus 4 year, you get a different IRR. And
Gotcha.
also, like nobody knows the formula of IRR, so that's why
No.
Excel has Excel has a built-in function for it. Thank God for
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I was like, don't try to explain the formula. Like
No,
it's no one understands it.
no,
That's awesome. No, that's super cool because yeah, you get more of this holistic view of the full big picture with the exit and with all the benefits, not just the cash flow. I feel like people a lot of times when they're doing the single family, they know that all that's there. They're just like, but that's extra. That's an assumption. I can't guarantee any of that,
right.
but it's cherry on top.
Yeah,
But when you're doing these big moves, like say that cherry can be a lot bigger than the whole pie. you know.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So you're still doing a couple flips though. When you say flips, are you talking about flipping apartments? Or are you doing a couple like single family Airbnb style flips? Or what are the flips that you're working on? Because you're working on a couple flips right now too, right?
Yeah. So I just picked them up. I picked a couple of them last year, and I just closed on one last week. So
Cool.
I swore I'm like I'm not going to do any more flips, not going to do any more single family rentals. I'll just focus on apartment buildings and focus on traveling and spending time with my family back in India. And then something just fell in my lap, and I'm like, okay, I can't pass this up. It's uh, it's basically the ARV of this deal is about a little over 1 million, and I was able to get into it without any cash out of pocket because I kind of like bought myself into this deal.
Mm,
And the all-in number, like purchase price plus rehab, is close to like 750 or 760. So we're at 75% ARV. So there's literally like no money out of our pockets at this point once we refi. So
yeah,
it's like, hey, I bought this like nice 4 unit. It's actually like two duplexes on one parcel and a vacant land, like 5 to 10 minutes away from like downtown Indy, which is like prime real estate. So
that's cool.
yeah, I'm like, this is too good to pass up. I want in on that deal.
So
So
how did you find that deal? You said you kind of like it came to you. How did you had to get into that,
so
especially with no money in?
my partner owned it.
Okay.
So it's the same guy that I own properties with. So it was his investment, and he was looking for help on like the rehab and stuff. I'm like, man, this project like excites me because it's so close to downtown, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of potential to rehab it and to realize its full potential. And he's like, hey, if you want in on it, like you can we can just like partner up, and you can take care of the complete rehab because it was a complete gut job on 4 units. So we had to
Yeah,
redo
and he's remote,
everything.
right? So he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
if you're on the ground, I already trust you. I know you.
yeah,
I'd rather get the value out of this by
right,
rehabbing it.
yeah,
So he brought you in to manage it all, and
yeah,
then you get a cut of the pie when it's
right,
all said
yeah,
and done.
yeah.
That's
So
cool.
we got the property appraised. It appraised for like one or 1.1, something like that, and we got approved for the rehab funds of it as well, up to 750, 760K. So with purchase price and rehab included, we are well under that. So by the time we get done, it's we don't have any money out of pocket. It's a bank
So the
financing
bank
it.
gave you the money to rehab it as well.
Right.
That's what's up.
Yep.
Um, I like. Did you guys have? I mean, you had to put 20% down though to purchase it, or no? How'd you arrange to get the bank to fund everything?
I didn't have to put anything down. But
Yeah.
yeah, but when we got the property appraised, it appraised for 1.1. We already owned it. We kind of have to like put money down, which is 20%, but it's basically him paying himself.
Right, because then he just
Uh,
gets it right
yeah,
back.
yeah. So, and then we got the funds approved to do the rehab, to basically gut all 4 units. And there's still room to like do a new development on the vacant land. So
That's awesome.
once a new development goes up, I think it'll be appraised for a lot higher. But right now, we just plan on leaving it as like a dog park.
So let me make sure, and you don't have to answer any of these if I'm getting too intimate on it. But so he owned it, but you guys went and actually did a transition of ownership to be able to do like a new loan based
Yeah,
on the purchase.
right.
Um, and so when he put the 20% down, he's actually buying it from himself.
Yeah,
Um, and so, but he actually did the sale just for the financing. He actually ended up doing an actual transaction
it's an
to
actual
get the new bank
transaction.
fund.
Yeah, yeah. It
That's
went from his
awesome.
personal name to like, so we own a company together. So we have
Uh
funds in the
huh.
company. So the funds transferred from the company purchasing the property to him as a seller. So it was a legitimate transaction.
Yeah.
But it just so happened that the buyer and seller are the same.
Guys,
Or
like if anybody's listening, I think that's a hack I haven't heard of that could actually be used even single family. Like if it's there and the equity's there and you can do this, like it's a way to tap into getting loans that you wouldn't typically be able to get those values if you just did a refinance or this, that, especially with the new appraisal and stuff like that. Because why not just refinance it as opposed to doing a transaction into the business? Was that just so that you could be on ownership, or why not just do a refinance as opposed to a sales transaction?
so I wanted to be on title. Like it's for
Yeah.
me to be on title, and we wanted it to be like in our company's name, not just like his name.
Perfect.
So we just had systems in place for our company stuff. So it just made sense for us to put it in our company's name than on his personal name.
Yeah.
And I definitely wouldn't want my personal name on the deed or anything. So I'd rather have it in the
Yeah.
company's.
So
Yeah,
you're able to kill two birds with one
yeah,
stone. You're able to put
yeah,
it in the entity for your
yeah.
partnership and get the refinance done at the
Right.
same time.
Yeah. So yeah, and as a straight purchase, we had so we basically followed like all the regular directions of normal purchase, right? You get like an as is appraisal and then as complete. So we told the bank that, hey, these are the rehab items that I want to do, which is basically a gut job on all 4 units. So we presented that to them, and the bank they sent out an appraiser, and the appraiser walked the entire neighborhood because it's like up and coming, and no parcel had two duplexes ever. Like
Mm.
It's like on one parcel you have these two duplexes and a vacant lot. So everything was just a package in one, and the appraiser like had to like pull out a few hairs to figure out how much is it worth. So
Yeah,
he went out a couple of blocks out, and we realized that he had to run it as an individual duplex. And then he came back with the appraisal, which was pretty accurate, which was our assumption as well. So what we did the as is and it as complete, and then we got approved for that whatever is the rehab amount that's needed to get it to like as complete status, which is
that's
well within
awesome.
the 80% ARV range.
That's cool. So for your partner, man, he's like he's not in this thing any money either as the new deal, but he's getting this
Right.
full rehab from you doing all the
Yeah.
work, and then he's going to get to walk away with hundreds of thousands of dollars. And because the idea is to sell it, right? And,
Uh,
at the end, or are you just burning it and keeping it?
I mean, right now we plan on doing an Airbnb on it
Oh,
since it's
okay,
so
cool.
close to downtown, the convention center, and everything else. Our plan is like give it a shot, the Airbnb. He sold his personal residence not too long ago, so we have a bunch of furniture just sitting around. So we're like, hey,
Nice.
no, why not just like give Airbnb a shot? It'll help us with the real estate status, and I'll be managing that. And if it doesn't work out, we can always sell it, but at least we should give it a shot.
That's cool, man. Well, man, so we're coming around to the end of it. I know we need to get moving here. I have so many questions. So what advice would be like the main thing you would give to somebody if they're like, hey, I want to get into apartments. I don't have a buddy that's like knows the whole world and can, fund everything and do everything. But what would maybe say some of the biggest paradigm shifts, or maybe even something I'm not asking about, jumping into that apartment complex world? What advice would you give to somebody who's just been doing single families but wants to make that transition?
So I think the first thing I'll tell them is don't fall for the trap. Like I know a lot of people tell you a lot of different things. I've had people tell me, hey, invest in self storage, invest in like trailer parks, invest in something this, that. First of all, like just get as much info as possible so you can make the decision on your own. Like I've
Mm,
had people advise me like invest in self storages. I
sure.
know a little bit, but I don't know entirely about it. But the one thing that helped me pull the trigger about apartments is I had people that knew what they were doing, so I could just like get information from them, like firsthand info, and these are people that I trusted. So I read up on it. I met people that were doing it. So and I saw the results that they were achieving. So all these three data points helped me make the decision. So
I love
somebody,
that.
yeah, if somebody wants to do it, I would say like don't just think about it in your own like echo chamber, but talk to people, network with people who are already doing it, run it by them, see what they think. And
Dude, that's oh sorry, go on.
yeah, I mean more often than not, a lot of people are willing to help, which is
Yeah.
very surprising to me. But people are nice; they help you out.
Dude, the real estate community is weird. Like
Yeah,
it literally, like even this, I was asking like, hey, Mihir, why did you decide to be a coach with real estate investing? Like you don't, it's not worth your time to sit there for an hour teaching somebody like how to run basic numbers. Like, why are you doing this? Like, you're like, I want to give back. Like, I love it. It changed my life. And it's like, there's that kind of sentiment in the community that people love to help, you know,
yeah.
um, help other investors. It's a fun thing. And it usually does end up giving back. Like say you get these partnerships, and there's all these benefits for you personally, but it also just feels good to
Oh,
just help.
absolutely, man. So when I first started, I had this like older couple that I ran into at a local event. They went out of their way to help me out and get me on board with the whole investing thing. And I was like,
That's
why
cool.
are you even doing this to me? Like I don't know you, but they took me under their wing and they literally taught me like, hey, this is what you do in rehab. This is what you do in terms of like purchase and stuff like that. So people are always there to help you out. So
That's cool.
the more people you reach out to about this, I think you'll get a better idea of what needs to be done.
I love that, man. And then before we dive into our final four questions, I just want to hit back on. I love the advice you gave when I was like, "Oh, what should you do about apartments?" It wasn't like, "Oh, this is how you look at that," or "This is why it's so much better." It was like the advice you gave was, I had a connection there that knew what they were doing, and I saw it was doing what I wanted to do, and so I pursued that. And I think that's so good. If somebody has this amazing connection to someone doing self storage or someone doing mobile homes or whatever, maybe bend that way. Like don't
Yeah,
be like,
yeah,
forget you. I'm gonna go do apartments. Like
yeah,
because Mahir did apartments. It's like, no, if you have a buddy that's killing it in this one realm
yeah,
and you can add value and have this synergistic relationship, go with that. That's what I always tell my students too. They're like, well, if I want to invest out of state, where should I start? What's the perfect market? I'm like, well, where do you have connections?
right.
I'm going to pick Indy because Mahir's there over Kansas if I know no one in Kansas. But if my
Absolutely.
aunt lives in Kansas and she's a property manager, I'm going to just go to Kansas,
Yeah.
even though Oklahoma might have better numbers on a spreadsheet. Like, go where you have connections. And obviously, if you have no connections, start networking and get some
Oh, absolutely.
connections.
Yeah. First of all, start with your connections. If you don't have connections, network and make connections, or
And
else
then
like this.
that
Yeah.
decides the
Yeah.
routes you should go. And there's more value in that than there is in, oh, well, I think this space has better numbers. It's like, yeah, but if you have
Yeah.
no connections and no resources and no one to go to,
Yeah.
the numbers don't matter as much. I think that's such profound, simple, but very profound advice. I love that.
Absolutely. And your numbers also depend on the people you know. Just on
For
paper, it
sure.
might be a great deal, but if you don't know anybody there, chance of you getting screwed over like way higher because
Hmm.
they're equal number of bad players as there are good players. So it's just something to keep in mind.
I love it, man. All right, well, sweet. Well, we'll bust into our final four questions. Before we do that, what's the best way for people to follow you if they want to learn more about what you're doing and if they want to reach out to you or whatever? What's the best way to keep in touch?
I'm on Instagram. I don't post a lot of real estate content. It's mostly like my travel and my drone photography, which I love.
Love
Uh,
that.
yeah, so I'm pretty active on Insta, so you can always connect with me. It's mihir.bmaraju, my first dot last name. But I
Cool.
also have a website. It's welcomehomeindy.com. Indie is INDIE.com.
Welcome home, Indy. I love it, man. Yeah, so check out his Instagram, check out his website. That's great. Well, let's dive into the final four questions, then we can let you get back to your real life, plan your next trip and your next purchase. So, well, sweet, man. All right. So number one, what is a real estate related bucket list item you've recently checked off or you're excited to check off next?
I recently checked off Europe. It has been on my list
That's
for like
right.
35 years, right from the moment I was born. I always wanted to go
That's
to Europe.
cool.
So yeah, I was really excited the moment I set foot in Europe. It was amazing.
Phenomenal country. Like, and here's the thing. I always like, oh, vacations. I want to go somewhere tropical or beautiful. And I was like, I don't really care about Europe. And then I went, and I was like, blew my mind. Like,
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it. So, what was some of your favorite countries you visited in Europe?
So Rome has always been on top of my list because I
Hmm.
love the European Renaissance period. I'm a huge history buff. I love the
Cool.
Renaissance period. So I was just like geeking out when I was in Rome. It was just like incredible architecture. The weather was perfect, and I've had a cousin in Czech Republic in Prague.
Oh,
So
cool.
that was a pleasant surprise. Like, I was not expecting anything out of Prague, but Prague at night is a sight to behold. It was
It's
incredible.
beautiful. It's
It's
awesome.
beautiful. Yeah.
That's cool. I actually only spent one night in Prague. I was coming back from somewhere, and I spent a night in Prague. But really cool. But yeah, Rome's amazing. It blew my
Yeah.
mind. Not like we could talk about this stuff forever, but it blew my mind. I'm walking through. I'm from the U.S. and there's nothing here older than a couple hundred years, right?
Right.
Like there in Rome, if it's only 200 or 300 years old, it's like that's new.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. You're
you're
right.
looking at buildings 2,000 years old. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you're like, it blew my
It's
mind like how old and how intricate and amazing and advanced their technology was back then,
right.
you know.
Right. It kind of seemed ridiculous to me. I'm like, are people like so 400, 500 years ago? Was everybody an artist? Like, how do you even achieve this level of perfection? It's like
I
every
know.
street has a masterpiece.
For real. Like I mean, I remember looking at did you go to shoot, I can't remember the name of it now, where the volcano covered it all.
I don't believe so. I doesn't ring a bell.
I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. Thousands of years ago, and they had like 3D perspective art. They had like, oh, Pompeii. That was it, Pompeii.
Oh, okay. No, I've
Um,
not been there.
Oh yeah, you'll have to go back. It's crazy because you're going down these paved roads. They
Yeah.
have running water throughout the city, heated floors. They have fast food. They had 3D perspective art, and this is hundreds of years before Christ. And meanwhile, in the Americas, like literally, at least in North America, it's like they're living in caves doing stick figures at the same time, and that was just like, oh my gosh. So pretty crazy. Anyway, so yeah, Europe, obviously, that's a great bucket list item. I encourage everybody to check it out. We'll get to the next question. People are like, we want to learn about real estate, not Europe, Joe. So, what book are you currently reading right now, Mihir?
So, my friend gifted me this book called The Warmth of Other Suns. It's a nonfiction book about the Great Migration that happened in the early 19th century.
Mm,
Workers from the South were migrating to the North. So it's a story that follows like three individuals, like families. So it's an interesting read. I don't read a
That's
lot of
cool.
books unless I
Yeah.
really have to.
Yeah.
My source of information is YouTube or like Chat GPT these days. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm
Well,
more
that
visual.
well, I like that. So that's the warmth of other suns,
Yeah,
like the sun.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to check that one out. I like that. So that leads into the next question, though. What you were just saying. So, what content or course or channel or YouTube or software or whatever would you recommend people check out?
So if it's somebody who is completely new to real estate, there are quite a few books out there, right? But I think for me, I'd be lying if I told them like, "Hey, read this, read that," because I'm not an avid reader myself.
Cool.
If I'm curious about something, I just go to YouTube and look that up. I just want the 10-minute snippet of it, and then I do my own thinking later on because that's how I truly like work. But the one book that really changed my mind is, as cliche as it sounds, it's Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
Like I cannot give that book enough credit because it just changed the mindset, and once the mindset changed, everything just like clicked. So that's the
Love
one
that.
book that I always recommend somebody who has like not read that.
Love it. All right. And then I guess last question then, what would be your text message to the world? You write a text message, send it out. We're all going to receive it. What do you want everybody to know?
Take action
Take action.
and go to Rome.
Go to Rome. That's right. Just go to Rome finally, everybody. Just do it. I love it, man. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks for spending some time with us. We'll have to have you back on again and see what you tackle in the next couple of years and where you've traveled to and whatnot. So this is super cool. Thanks for being on, man.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Well, without any further ado, this is Joe Jensen signing off for the Real Estate Investing School podcast, reminding you to start networking and take action.